In February of 2022, Pokemon released Brilliant Stars, the 9th main Sword and Shield set in the Pokemon trading card game. It featured the introduction of VSTAR Pokemon, as well as the introduction of the Trainer Gallery, which would be a staple of mainline Pokemon TCG sets for the entirety of 2022. And it looks like it's carrying over into 2023 as well, which I'm really excited for. However, in this video, we're going to focus on the mainline cards from Brilliant Stars and how they impacted the game from a competitive perspective. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and one quick disclaimer before we get into this. I usually try and release these videos with context on how they interact with the current meta. However, Crown Zenith is out right now, and I'm recording this before the release of Crown Zenith, because I'm trying to get ahead on videos because my wife is due any day now. And by the time this video comes out, the baby will be here and I'm going to have less time to make videos. You've probably still seen videos. I'm trying to get ahead so that there's still content out while I'm out being a dad. So just a quick disclaimer there, just in case you're like, oh, but Regigigas VSTAR interacts really well with this trainer. It's okay. That's why. Let's start with VSTAR Pokemon. They evolve from Pokemon V, and unlike Pokemon V Max, they have a little bit lower HP. They kind of top out at 280, though Regigigas VSTAR is going to have 300 HP, so a little lower than a V Max. However, the biggest draw to them is that, one, they only drop 2 prizes instead of 3, making them a lot more viable in competitive play because you have more opportunities to stay alive. Your opponent, generally speaking, in a V deck is going to have to hit you 6 times in order to win, versus a V Max deck, you only have to take out 2 V Maxes, 4 hits. So that really skewed the prize race in 2022. On top of that, VSTAR Pokemon have a one-time use power. It could be an attack, it could be an ability, but it is something that helps to make the VSTAR Pokemon even more powerful in theory. Some VSTARs are pretty bad, but others are absolutely game-changing. Arguably, the most game-changing VSTAR is Arceus VSTAR with 280 HP, pretty tanky, with the move Trinity Nova for 3 colorless energy, does 200 damage, and you get to accelerate 3 basic energy of any type to your Pokemon on the bench and split them up any way you like. This is insanely powerful and pretty much reshaped the game. There were entire Pokemon V as a whole got better with the use of Arceus, and there were so many Pokemon V that found new life because Arceus could accelerate to them when they didn't have acceleration otherwise. Duraludon is maybe the golden example of this, where Duraludon by itself really struggled despite having a lot of potential, and then Arceus came along and made it the top tier card that it always had the potential to be. On top of that, it's VSTAR Power, Starbirth. You pop the Starbirth and you get to get any 2 cards of your choice from your deck, which was absolutely ridiculous. Such an incredibly powerful ability that oftentimes, if you went first and you got Starbirth, you use that to get the 2 cards you needed to set up, and oftentimes you could just run away with the game. Now, Arceus isn't seeing as much play these days. It's being power crept by stuff like Lugia and, to a lesser extent, Palkia, though Palkia was definitely a problem later on. Arceus is still a popular Pokemon. It's still incredibly strong, and it has definitely shaken up the game as a whole by making a whole bunch of other Pokemon V, VSTAR, and VMAX viable thanks to its amazing attacks and ability. While we're here, we should also talk about Arceus V with Trinity Charge, For 2 colorless energy, search your deck for 3 basic energy and attach them to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. With the help of double turbo energy, you could do this on the first turn going second. And I should have also mentioned here that Trinity Nova, oftentimes when you're doing it the first time, you're using double turbo energy to cover the cost. So you're actually doing 180 damage most of the time, but even the 20%, the 20 damage drop wasn't that big of a deal. You could put a Choice Belt on, you could put in a Zigzagoon to get you to 220 to knock out a Pokemon V. Arceus is great. The other V-Stars in the set may not have been as strong as Arceus, but a few of them got some play here and there. For example, Whimsicott V-Star with its Trick Wind attack does 160 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any Pokemon tools or special energy cards from their hand. This card for a couple of weeks was an absolute terror. Thanks to double turbo energy, you could cover that cost in just 2 attachments. 140 is not great, but at the peak of Arceus Mania, Whimsicott was just like, no, you don't get to accelerate right now, and you can't get your game plan going. This also came out at a time when Rapid Strike Urshifu Moltres was one of the most competitively viable decks, and Whimsicott ate Urshifu alive. It was crazy. And so for a couple of weeks, Whimsicott V-Star was an absolute monster. Charizard V-Star was also in the set. I actually think this card is not bad. It hasn't seen much play at all, but I actually think it's okay. Explosive Fire for 130 damage, and you do 100 more damage if Charizard has any damage on it. For 230, that's pretty good. You can use Magma Basin to cover the cost in 2 turns. And Star Blaze for 320 damage. You discard 2 energy. And yeah, you're doing 320 damage, which is nuts. Enough to one-hit KO almost anything in the game. This saw some play with Arceus. You can play it by itself, kind of with like Entei and other fire Pokemon in a firebox. I personally love to play this card in the Lost Zone engine and still get that 320 damage, and you're not relying on Arceus for it. It's pretty... I was about to say great. It's not great. I think it is all right. Last and kind of least for V-Star Pokemon, Shaman V-Star for 2 energy has the move Revenge Blast for 120 damage, and this attack does 40 more damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. So you kind of want this as a comeback move or a late game attacker, but I think it got hurt by having a very specific use, and Grass type was just really poor in 2022, so this saw virtually no play. And even with its V-Star power, where you got to heal 120 damage from all of your benched Grass Pokemon, it wasn't enough to get this card to see play. Lumineon V was a staple card in many decks. With its Luminous Sign ability, you put it on the board and you got to grab a supporter card of your choice. Really handy for grabbing that one supporter you need, whether it's Marnie for hand disruption, Boss for some gusting, Professor's Research to help you draw more cards. Whatever it is, Lumineon's got your back. And most decks wouldn't run really more than just one of these. I think current Lugia decks are running 2. But still, it's a handy one of in many decks, and I think we're going to see more of this once Crobat rotates out. Yes, Crobat's kind of a different thing, but Lumineon is going to see... I think it's going to see more play with Crobat going away. Bibarel is one of the best support engines in the game right now, and it was introduced in Brilliant Stars. Thanks to its ability, Industrious Incisors, I think it's with the teeth. Anyway, thanks to its ability, it lets you draw up to 5 cards. And if you've got multiple Bibarels on the board, you can draw up to 5, play a couple cards, and draw even more cards. It's kind of like the budget version of Genesect, but you can use it in any deck. And this was a great draw engine for many decks. I think there are various Arceus decks that aren't using Shady Dealings that love the Bibarel engine, and Bibarel actually won the World Championship this year, paired up with Arceus and Flying Pikachu and Decidueye VSTAR. This is going to be a staple of many decks for the foreseeable future. Manaphy is such a clutch card with its Wave Veil ability, protecting the bench from snipe damage. And you have to keep in mind, right? When this came out, around the time this came out, there wasn't any bench sniping. Bench barrier Mew had rotated out, and there was a couple of months where there was no protection on the bench, and cards like Rapid Strike Urshifu and Jolteon were terrorizing the scene. And then Manaphy came in here and really helped slow that stuff down. Now, Manaphy is not mandatory in every deck. There are a couple of decks that don't run it, but there are a lot of decks that still do, because they're trying to prevent that bench damage, which can be really devastating. And even now, there are still bench attacks in play. I think Kyogre is the big one in particular. Amazing Rare Raikou is another big one. So Manaphy's pretty clutch to have. Raikou V has been on a little bit of a journey here. I always thought this card was good because it's basically Suicune V except lightning type, and Suicune V for the time was pretty good. It does struggle more than I thought it would because the format kind of got power crept upwards in terms of damage output, and Raikou V is oftentimes getting one-hit KO'd. However, it is blessed with a low energy attack with Lightning Rondo, can do up to 220 damage if both benches are full. And on top of that, it's also lightning type, so it is hitting some of the most meta relevant Pokemon for weakness, such as Palkia V and Lugia V-Star. And this has kind of found its way as a tech card in certain decks like Lost Box in particular, and I'm glad to see Raikou getting some play. Aggron VMAX is a card we don't see all that much. It's got 330 HP, which is really good. It's got 4 Retreat, which is crazy. But its big move, max takedown for 270 damage for 5 energy, 2 of those metal, 3 of them colorless. And you also do 30 damage to yourself. Throw a Choice Belt on there, and you're one-hit KOing V-Stars. Odds are you can KO 2 V-Stars before they KO the V-Max. And we're mentioning this here because this actually got top 16 at the World Championships with Arceus VSTAR, and we have to put some respect on its name for that. Flygon V has a really interesting move with a horrible energy cost. Draconic Impulse does 160 damage, and if you're attacking a Pokemon V Max, it does 160 more damage, and you discard 3 energy. It's really hard to get that energy on there. You could do that with Arceus, for example. However, it ended up being a little too situational, and this card fell off pretty quickly. However, it is tantalizing for sure, and it could find a home in the Regidrago deck. I personally don't run it in my Regidrago deck because I hate the idea of potentially having to start Flygon and not have any energy to fight with, but it is an interesting card nevertheless. A personal favorite of mine, Raichu V, has the potential to one-hit KO anything in the game with Dynamic Spark, where you can discard lightning energy from all of your Pokemon and you do 60 damage for each card you discard this way. Now, it is a little clunky to pull off. You're gonna have to build up that energy over the course of multiple turns on all of your Pokemon, most likely with the Flaffy engine, though I've seen it played with Arceus as well. And its HP is really low. It's getting one-shotted in this current meta, so it is a bit of a liability. But if you can set it up, Raichu V is so much fun to play, and I love just bringing in Raichu at the end of the game and swinging for like 600 damage on a V Max. It's pretty sick. Fire decks have had a rough go at it, and even with the support that fire decks have gotten throughout the year, they never really got much play. but when they did get some play, this Moltres was not bad. For only 1 energy, you did 20 damage, and if it has any damage counters on it, you did 70 more damage for 90. You would charge this up with Magma Basin to get the damage on there, and then you'd bring it into the active, and you'd use this to land that initial damage to soften something up for later, while also only dropping a prize in the process. It was not bad. Grotle and Torterra were an interesting combo here. When you evolved into Grotle, you got the ability Sun-Drenched Shell. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for a grass Pokemon, reveal it, and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. And the idea is you are building up multiple Torterras and evolution Pokemon on your board, and Torterra does 50 damage for each of your evolution Pokemon in play. This has the potential to hit for up to 300 damage for only 2 energy, which is really tantalizing, but the fact that it is a stage 2 Pokemon made it really tough to play. Wormadam got 3 different versions of Wormadam in Brilliant Stars. There's a grass one, there's a metal one, there's a fighting one. And the idea behind the Wormadam deck is that you would use Matron's Anger, which does 30 damage and 10 more damage for each Pokemon in your discard pile. So you're trying to throw a whole bunch of Pokemon in the discard pile, and then you're picking the right Wormadam to hit for weakness, if you can hit for weakness, and just do a bunch of damage that way. This never really took off. It did see a little bit of play in the Zoroark box deck, but otherwise, Wormadam isn't really seeing a lot of play, but we have to mention it because it did see a little bit. One of the only Fusion Strike Pokemon outside of the main Mew deck that has seen a little bit of experimentation, Ice-Q got into the mix just a bit thanks to its Block Slider move. It does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each Fusion Strike energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So this gives you about upwards of 160 snipe damage, which could be pretty good. I think most Mew decks have just opted to go without it, but it is an interesting alternative, and I would love to see more Fusion Strike cards enter the mix to spice things up a little bit. Lucario is a fun one. This one has the ability Roaring Resolve, where once during your turn you may put 2 damage counters on this Pokemon, and if you do that, you search for a fighting energy card and attach it to this Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. And you would be attaching the energy to do the move Aura Sphere Volley, which does 10 damage, and you discard all of your fighting energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 60 more damage for each card you discard this way. So you're doing at least 130, but because you can build the Lucarios up on the bench, you can have Lucarios that have more than 2 energy, and you're doing even more damage, and you are doing enough to do decent damage to most Pokemon. But at the Brilliant Stars time, you could one-hit KO Arceus pretty easily as long as they don't have Dunsparce down, and you're even doing decent damage against most of the V and V Max Pokemon. Now, the big problem with this deck is that it gets eaten alive by Lost Box, and even then, without that deck, it still wasn't the most reliable single prize deck in the game. However, it is one of my favorite single prize decks to play. Tornadus saw a little bit of play. Because of its sudden Cyclone ability, where you have to force your opponent to switch their active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. Yes, your opponent gets to pick which one, but in certain decks, you don't really care. I think Blissey Miltank is one in particular that did tech in Tornadus and did really well for a little bit in tournaments. I remember there was one tournament where I think it got to grand finals, and Tornadus was a big help in that deck. Sharon's Care was a godsend for Arceus VSTAR, where you could create some really nasty loops where you could just heal your Arceus over and over again and just win the war of attrition that way. One of my favorite cards, the Gucci Belt. It's the choice belt. I always call it the Gucci Belt. This one does 30 more damage makes your Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to Pokemon V, and because of how prevalent Pokemon V are in the meta, you absolutely played at least one of these, if not multiples, because you want that extra damage. In particular, this helped neutralize the gap between Pokemon V and single prize Pokemon as well. I don't know if it necessarily got all the way there to parity, but this card definitely helped bridge the gap. Collapse Stadium isn't the strongest stadium, but it is annoying. It brings both benches down to 4 Pokemon instead of 5, and certain decks got hurt by this really bad. The Regigigas one comes to mind, where not having full access to the bench means you can't use your Regigigas energy acceleration ability. In current times, this is actually a little better thanks to Eternatus making a crazy comeback these days, and forcing Eternatus to go down to 4 Pokemon from 8 is actually soul crushing. Cynthia's Ambition saw some play here and there, in particular in single prize decks that take a lot of knockouts. If your Pokemon was knocked out on the previous turn, you actually get to draw up to 8 cards. If they haven't been knocked out, you draw up to 5, but drawing up to 8 was great. I think the Malamar deck in particular, love this card. Helped you draw up to 8, get a bunch of Rapid Strike cards into your hand, and just do a billion damage. Fire decks got a bunch of support throughout 2022, and even then they didn't really crack into the meta. Magma Basin was one of the cards that the Pokemon Company put in to help, where you could accelerate energy for 20 damage in exchange for 20 damage, and even then it wasn't really enough to close the gap. At this point, the only real meta relevant fire Pokemon is Radiant Charizard, which is awesome, but the whole type as a whole definitely needs some help. I normally don't talk about the return of cards introduced in previous sets in these Sword and Shield retrospectives, but Ultra Ball is a big one. This is a card where you play it, you discard 2 cards, and you get to grab any Pokemon of your choice. A lot of decks have 4 Ultra Ball in them. Maybe they have a split between Ultra Ball and Evo Incense, but Ultra Ball is going to be a big factor going forward as Evolution Incense is rotating out, and at least at the time of this recording, it doesn't look like we're getting a Evo Incense like card. So Ultra Ball might be our only viable way of grabbing evolution Pokemon. Yes, there's that capturing aroma card where you have to flip a coin and you have a 50% chance of grabbing an evolution. I still don't believe in that card, and I don't want to be in a world where I have to rely on that for my evolution Pokemon. So Ultra Ball it is. We only saw 1 special energy added to the game in Brilliant Stars, but it's a good one. Double Turbo Energy gives you 2 colorless energy in 1 attachment, and it works on anything. Single prize Pokemon, Pokemon V, V Max, V Star. It's not limited in the same way that Twin Energy is. However, you will do 20 less damage on your attacks, but most of the time it was worth it. Thus concludes our look at Brilliant Stars. I think this was a really strong set and a really fun one if you were buying packs because of the trainer gallery. However, from a competitive standpoint, this was crazy good. The advent of V-Stars, Arceus VSTAR, Double Turbo Energy, Sharon's Care, Lumineon, Choice Belt, tons of staple cards that are in this set, making it one of the strongest sets we've ever seen in competitive play. Well, I don't know if in Sword and Shield era competitive play. So this one is one of my personal faves. What say you? What's one of your favorite Sword and Shield sets? Let me know in the comments of this video. And again, thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your support. The channel has been doing I mean, it's been blowing my mind for a number of months now as the Pokemon content has taken off. I truly appreciate your support, especially in this time where I haven't been able to upload as much because the baby is here now. Not like as I'm recording this, but by the time you're watching this, I am somewhere changing diapers on my wife and I's first ever child. So we appreciate your support on the videos and for us having a kid. All right, time to get out of here. Some quick plugs. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In Third Person. Come by the Twitch channel sometime. Say hello. I am on there every Sunday at 9 a.m. playing the Pokemon trading card game. And check out my website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, what are we covering next on the Sword and Shield retrospective? Oh, it's Astral Radiance. Astral Radiance is really good too. I think people are sleeping on that set. In particular, I love me some Samurott. And I think you guys know that. I love Samurott. I'm excited to talk about Samurott in the next video. All right, let's get out of here. I'll see you on the next one. Later.